I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Mike Raznick, and I'm here to talk about why game audio is vital to the success of your game and how to get the best results from your audio partner. So, a little bit about me. I have 10 years experience in the game industry, working mostly as a composer, but also as a project manager. I've worked on over 500 projects, covering casual, mobile, indie, and AAA. Some of the games I worked on are the Ratchet & Clank series, Farmville, a bunch of Harry Potter games, and a number of Clash of Clans stuff as well. So the goal of this talk is to empower game developers on how to work with their audio partner to get the best results for their game. And just a note that we're providing general guidelines here on each team, and the collaborative relationships between the developer and audio are unique, and some of these concepts may vary. So moving on, the importance of game audio. Let's start out by covering 4 points: immersion, connection with characters, emotional investment, and player feedback. And I also want to just start by answering just some really basic questions as what is our goal when developing a game? I would argue that we could start out by saying a game should be fun, engaging, a rewarding experience, entertaining, and also a chance to leave our world behind by entering an imaginary world. Getting closer to immersion now, and using voiceover, sound effects, music, and dynamically driven audio, we can achieve the following. With immersion, audio helps to subconsciously transport us to different emotional states. Music can cause chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin to be released, engaging the brain's reward system. And connection with the characters, second thing. Audio helps the player connect with the characters in the game's subject matter. For example, with musical themes, when a musical theme is played, it communicates often subconsciously what's going to happen, even though we may not realize that that audio is cluing us in. Third thing, emotional investment, where transcendent audio can make a game feel somehow more important and more significant and therefore more realistic. And finally, audio also provides feedback to the player on their performance, their proximity to things like danger, and it also clues us into how we just performed, perhaps, in a gameplay situation. So, an example of immersion with sound effects. I want to play this example, which has 15 seconds of silence, and you can feel how music and sound not being there may not feel quite as engaging. This clip is a great example of feeling the involvement during gameplay. Without sound effects, we feel detached, where you're just walking through the actions. But once you add sound effects, it starts to feel real, and we become much more invested in gameplay.
Hostile care package.
Okay, moving on. With voiceover, it also similarly brings characters to life. Voiceover creates a feeling of connection. For instance, what if Darth Vader didn't breathe so heavily? Voiceover gives characters identity, it allows us to get to know them, and it gives them personality. Now, emotional connection. Here's an example of how music allows us to feel not just emotionally connected, but also helps inform us of the emotion and what a scene is trying to convey. We all know the famous Star Wars ceremony scene after our heroes destroy the Death Star. But without music, the scene feels confusing, awkward, and a bit boring, perhaps. And the music actually is the thing that provides this emotional feedback. Great music elevates the experience. It tells a story, allows us to forget where we are, and also that we're actually even playing a game. It makes us feel closer to what it would feel like if the experience is real. So, interactivity and player feedback. What is the importance here? What is important here is that audio makes us feel like things are more believable. It informs us. It tells us how to perceive in-game experiences and much more. And additionally, event-driven and interactive audio also provides player feedback. It helps drive how intensely we feel during gameplay. It provides information on where we are from different locales as well as impending visitors, both good and bad. So, the next big question, now that we've learned how important audio is for a game, is how to get the most out of your audio partner. And we can start that by basically, let's pretend for a second that we're assuming that we're creating a game, and we want to create a fun, immersive experience. Maybe it should be playful, maybe it should be dark, mysterious, exciting, scary, or friendly. And audio is the thing that can really take you there. And great audio can elevate that experience to another level. And if it's really great, that experience might even become iconic. So the question is, how do you get the most out of your audio partner? And the first step is choosing the right audio partner. First, I would say make sure to choose the best person or team for your project. Some things to look for are shared goals and passion for your project. Someone that's a team player, or a team that's a team player, easy to work with. Someone who understands your vision and can help enhance that with their expertise and commitment to creating something great. And other factors to consider is discuss is what is the overall style of the game? What type of audio will communicate these aesthetics to your players? And then also budget, of course. There are a number of ways to make this work, and I'll discuss in a little minute. But scalability, and also, are they a good fit with your team and existing culture? So, starting with aesthetics and creating a style guide. So you want to make sure that you're on the same page with your audio developer, and also that you don't end up with something like this. Best to create a cohesive game presentation. And if you're not sure, it's great to trust your audio partner and have them pitch some ideas by putting temp music over a static video capture of gameplay, etc., and to mock up ideas before actually creating original content. So, another aspect of this is scalability with team and assets. For instance, like how big is the game, and also in terms of, again, budget, having potential for reusability of assets. Depending on budget and amount of time to release, this job may be for one audio person or a whole team. Also, you can get more mileage oftentimes by having shorter music pieces if needed, and less cues that can be repurposed for varying degrees of success. And finally, if your game needs voiceover or dynamically driven score, not all games do, but many do, and it can enhance the experience quite a bit. Now, going on to audio budget considerations. Let's see, your budget will help determine what audio solution is workable. The goal is to make your game come to life. So I'm going to outline a couple different ideas for different budget levels, starting with on the lowest end of stock library tracks. The reward, obviously, is you don't have to spend very much money. The risk is that it's hard to find a perfect fit. Also, it may not loop perfectly if you need music loops. The production quality may vary, and if it doesn't elevate the experience, the player may turn off the music or find it annoying. The second step on more low budget projects would be perhaps to hire someone starting out or still in school, and they may be willing to work for free or for very little and do a lot of content. The next step up would be maybe hiring a professional and let them retain ownership of their work, where you could basically license their music, but they would still create the music for them, but that also allows them to go out and potentially find additional licensing and revenue sources from the same work. And in that same vein, you can also offer them a percentage of the game profit, oftentimes 1 to 5%, and this is a way of hiring a professional, again, with a lower budget in mind if the budget doesn't exist. Also, and then moving up, you can hire a professional and do a buyout if there's a more healthy budget. And finally, to really bring up the production value, maybe consider augmenting with a production budget on top of the audio fee for your team, with live musicians, professional mix, hiring a real orchestra, or doing mastering. Okay, so culture and synergy. The last factor, of course, in choosing an audio partner is making sure they fit well with your personality and the work culture, and that they share your passion for the project. One of my clients lists and describes their values on their website as passion, creativity, communication, and professionalism. Building trust and synergy will greatly enhance the creative process and overall production. So, moving on. Now, let's talk about production and managing the audio pipeline. So this gets a little more into project management and setting things up properly. So starting out, we'll talk about setting expectations, which are writing down and documenting deadlines, documenting what's required, and also having an audio asset sheet and being able to make them trackable. Also, great communication, which would fall into like project management and tools. Also, being able to document that using applications such as Slack or frequent meetings, things like that. Next would be defining revision cycles ahead and setting expectations about what's reasonable and required. Planning ahead and preparation can minimize the need for extra work to take place later in the project. And also, I'd recommend getting your team involved early for the best results, depending on size. Give everyone more time to develop ideas, and allow different teams to influence each other to create a more cohesive experience. And finally, I also mentioned that reasons for involving the audio team early is, in my experience, the music and sound can be heavily influenced by the following factors with other teams involved in the game creation process. So like the art team, the overall theme, the gameplay mechanics, tempo and velocity of gameplay, and again, passion. But it's great to be working on the music early and then have the art team, for instance, be able to hear that work, and then maybe they get excited and start upping their game with the art, and then that might be really cool, and then the musician hears it again and might want to create something even better, and that can create a feedback loop where the whole process can really gain a lot from that. So let's see, moving on into pre-production. After hiring a team, it's important to start things off with a clear creative direction to establish the work moving forward in the right direction. Having creative conversations, I think it's absolutely utmost important, is talking with your developer or with your music team or audio team early in the process, and exploring aesthetically, what's possible and what can be done to make the game as good as it can be. And also document and define audio assets. One of the ways we do this is to learn as much about the project as possible, having like a great game design document, reading through it, talking about it, and then having both sides presenting like temp music and examples of stuff that exists, and then providing very descriptive feedback about what they like and don't like about it, about the instruments, the tempo, and it greatly informs the process and helps set a stage for a successful production schedule and experience. So I'm going to give some examples of temp feedback about how to be properly descriptive about what you like or don't like about it. So these are all examples of temp feedback that I've heard. This is before we started a project, just on pieces of music that we put in front of the client. For instance, they might say, "I love it. I think the tempo really fits some key parts of the game." Another example would be the echoey sound here could work in the cave areas of the game. So, all of these things start to inform how we can sort of approach different locales within the game. I like the ambient sound here, but would prefer at least some flurries of instrumental music. So in this particular game, it was very, very ambient. But, I knew because of this feedback, I knew there could be some tracks where it would be very quiet, but then to add certain kinds of flavors of things. This particular temp piece feels a bit too tribal or warlike. Again, that would also, key the audio team into what could work and what might not work. So next, deliverables and assets. Okay, great. So we can actually really see this. So this is where it all starts, is and additionally sort of defining, what is going to be needed and what the scope is of the project, and getting really specific about what cues and sound effects and voiceover is needed for the game. The asset tracking sheet allows the game developer to get 100% organized on exactly what audio assets are required for a project. It provides a starting point for all things creative and allows us to come up with a concise way of tracking and budgeting a project. So note that we can create a separate music sheet for sound effects, voiceover, implementation, and documenting all of these things. So the fields are the asset name, the location in the game, whether it loops or not, and then providing like perhaps YouTube links as references or Spotify links, and then tracking and feedback or revision information, which would come to the right of this. Okay, so And then let's talk about revision cycles. So how many revisions are reasonably expected? Obviously, a never-ending amount of revisions can sort of create a zombie mentality. So it's typical to allow up to 3 revision cycles on projects, and with proper pre-production guidelines and processes in place, this number seems to work about 90% of the time. Everyone should be on the same page, and things should run very smoothly if we've gone through all the proper steps of pre-production and temp music and conversations about what's going to be appropriate for the game. Also, from my experience, things do not go well when the client does not know what they want at this stage in the process. Sometimes we'll create music or sound effects, and they just will say it doesn't work, but they don't necessarily know why. And I think at this point, when this happens, it's better to start over again and do another round of temp music and start listening and putting new music in front of the game to see what is actually going to work. So, now some tips on giving feedback to keep the team inspired. It's great to provide positive and encouraging feedback because we are all on the same team. Your audio team is part of your team, and the goal should be to keep everyone excited and inspired, and this will create a situation where there will be better work done, and everyone will feel better about it in the end. And also, again, being descriptive in feedback. Some examples of some feedback that has been non-descriptive that doesn't seem to help at all, or if the client says something like, this music or the sound is a bit off, or I'm not a fan of this, it just isn't specific enough to give us any real information about how to improve it. I'm going to give a couple examples now of some more descriptive and constructive feedback. So these are actual client feedbacks that we received. One is the only comment that I would have at the moment would be about the fast combat piece is that we might want to remove the echo effects. So immediately I know exactly what needs to be changed. Another example would be the higher pitched instrument, kind of the synth flute in the foreground, gets a little too monotonous right before it gets a rest around 2 minutes and 20 seconds in. So again, I would know exactly what to change from this client feedback. So that pretty much wraps things up. Thank you all for listening and enjoying this, hopefully. And if anyone has any questions, we have some time for a QA right now. Your question was about if the audio team is putting temp music in front of the client, and does that affect the client's need to have the temp music sound exactly, the original music to sound exactly like the temp music? And I would argue that the answer is generally no. I think that one of the things we try to do is provide enough different samples of temp music and get enough feedback about what works about a track and what works not about a track. Sometimes it does happen, but I think one of the skills of a media composer oftentimes is how to put their own flavor and their own sound on a particular track, so it doesn't end up sounding like exact copy. It's one of my least favorite things to do is to write something that sounds exactly like something else. I'm always trying to push things in a little bit of a different direction, or also just through the understanding of the thematic material of a game, try to stay true to that and create something unique. I have had some situations where we'll do sort of an hourly fee for implementation services. Sometimes I've also heard of other audio teams where they'll sort of tack on maybe like maybe hiring charging 50% additional on top of a queue for a certain amount of like implementation, especially on the music side. Sound effects can be different. Sometimes we'll just throw things in as part of a package deal and just try to get a feel for how much work is going to be involved in terms of man hours. A lot of times I would say that they probably contacted you already. It seems most of the times I'm contacting game developers, they've already heard from 40 other people. But that's a great question. I think there's a number of them here at the conference who would love to speak with you. I'd be happy to speak with you. I think others as well, maybe perhaps. So yeah, Google searches. Just keep your ears out, I think, and talk to other developers as well. I think a lot of people have, especially who've been around, have worked with a lot of audio people. It's an important part of the process. Sourcing temp music, I think again it kind of comes back to having those conversations. And I mean, my favorite thing to do, from experience is getting on a Skype call or having lunch with the developer, and just getting some FaceTime, getting to know them, talking to them about their project, and really trying to immerse myself in understanding what the game developer is looking for, and what the emotion of it feels like, is it story driven? Is it, is it fun and silly? Like, where is it going? Does it have, what kind of emotional arc it has? And then maybe finding similar references out there. Some of it is just going back to maybe what your favorite music is. I mean, there's no right or wrong way to approach it. It's just about creating an aesthetic. I think that's really what's key. Oh, I would say YouTube a lot of times. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. A lot of times it's going back to either film music, TV music, sometimes pop music, again, depending on the project and stuff. Spotify can be great as well. Sometimes it's just going through my own collection of stuff I have on my computer and firing over MP3s, or even maybe things that, our team or other teams that we know have written on project. I think it's important with, to also note that, professionals can take things in a lot of different directions as well. And I mean, I think I talk to a lot of composers, for instance, and I think, one of the favorite challenges is to do something you've never done before. And sometimes wonderful things can happen there as well. So but it goes both ways as well. It's also nice to be able to trust somebody who's done something and you already like what they've done. Thanks very much.